Bob.
Yeah, this was a piece of red bud burl that I had. And my original plan was to dye this using red and yellow. And as I got into it, I just thought this grain and the color of it is just too pretty to do anything to. So I ended up using Seal-A-Cell to seal it, and then I used just buffed it with the Cornoga wax, and I left it at that. The pedestal's a piece of cherry that was dyed with Black India ink. A couple applications there. And I haven't actually attached that pedestal yet because I'm still cogitating whether or not I like it or not. So that may still change.
I think it works.
That's the second rendition. So I'm just toying around with some different designs.
Very nice.
That's the beautiful piece of wood.
Yeah, it was beautiful when I got to turn it. It was just really nice. I was hoping that piece, you can see that to the left there, I was really wondering if that thing was going to come flying off at some point. So that's why the walls are a little thicker than I would have liked to had them. I was just afraid to go any further for fear that thing would just come flying apart.
Yep, I think that's a valid fear.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, Bob,
Yes.
I don't know if it's just the perspective that I'm getting on here because you're shooting from the top down, but the pedestal seems awfully small to me for the fullness, the big roundness that your bowl has. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, that's one of the things that I'm kind of playing around with. The base appeared a little thick to me, but I don't know. That's just me. I like a little finer pedestal. If I'm doing finials, the same thing. But that is the pedestal's about 2 inches high, and the chalice itself is 3 inches high. So they're similar, but it may be that it could be pulled up further and give it a little bit better presentation. Something worth
I mean,
trying.
but with a 3-inch chalice, I would think that you would need a 5-inch stem anyway, just so it doesn't. It looks just like it's hovering over the table a little bit on this little pin. But
Well, it's probably going to get a couple of different pedestals before it gets finalized. So I'm going to try something a little bit higher. It's
I'm sure it's going to be great.
Yeah, I just had an annoying thought. What about photoshopping in a variety of different heights and widths and thicknesses of pedestals to see what they look like? Just start with the photo of the object and then patch in a whole bunch of little things.
all right. You're
like
taking all the fun out of it, Alan.
More fun to turn it.
I like the height.
Sorry,
of
I
it.
was born an engineer and we like to solve
I
problems,
know.
even when
Be
people
efficient,
don't have
right?
them.
Is there
I
any way
like the height of it. I think it really, the only question I would have is to try brown instead of black.
Well, Alf, that's a good question too, because that was another question. I've done so many of these things with black, and I was toying around with other colors, and I'm not sure what direction to go. So
Yeah, the black really works for me too, but I'm like you. I wonder what the brown would look like.
well, the actual pedestal was originally, well, it is cherry, and I may try that, and I might try a piece of mahogany and see if I can do that, see what it looks like. So
is
I
there any
tried a
way
lighter
to,
color wood also, but it just dawned on me that doesn't look like a chalice. You know, the stereotype standard look of a chalice isn't that. It's a much longer stem and broader base.
yeah.
And maybe
Stephen,
change the name.
Stephen, did you have something that you were trying to get in? Question?
I wanted to ask, is there any way to use resin or wood stabilizer for the piece and then turn it thinner?
I have never used a lot of the stabilization that's available, so I'm not really comfortable answering that. Steve might be able to say, since he does a lot of that, or maybe Norm or somebody, but I've never really used.
Were you to the bark inclusion?
Sorry,
To
yeah,
the
and the
bark
bark,
inclusion?
yeah.
How far across does it go?
Well, where you see that in the center there, that's where it stops.
Oh, yeah. It's more a matter of how much of the shape you've turned, because you got to get the angle so that it doesn't, flow away. But that looks, I mean, you could pour resin in that, I think. It's a matter of whether or not you can balance it so the resin will fill.
Yeah, it could be a whole different look. I mean, once you start putting resin in it, but yeah, I mean, the other thing you could do would be to put, that nylon stranded tape around the outside of it while you're turning it, and then use a steady with that to
It'll
try to
only
keep
fall
it.
apart when you take the tape off.
Yeah. So,
The only fear with
Finish it
the
with the tape
resin,
on.
the resin, I would be fearful if their bark is there's gonna be a lot of air in that resin. So if you don't have a long set resin, you're gonna get a lot of air bubbles.
yeah, you have to use epoxy. You certainly couldn't use aluminite. You couldn't use the polyurethane resins. But
Now, I wouldn't go for clear. You just want to fill it.
Yeah, but the type of resin, if it's a fast set, you're gonna get air bubbles. That slow, thick set, you can probably pull it off and dye it.
all right,
I
let's
like
do,
it. I like it the way it is. I would not use resin. That's just me.
all right, Craig.
Thank you.
All right, this is one of the pieces I'm working on now. So just to give an idea for people to see how I put them on the lathe and what they look like.
This is your mini lathe, right?
Yeah.
Correct. Yes.
It's like a mid-
Is that plywood between the pieces there?
Yes, it is.
Is that just filler, or is that part of the piece?
No, that's just filler, mostly for helping when I reassemble the sculpture, help line everything back up and space it properly.
Okay. And what's? Oh, sorry. Whoops. Let me get back. What's the diameter of that faceplate?
82 inches.
Yeah.
Honking.
Yeah, his full-size lathe is also known as the International Space Station.
I want to see the tractor that spins that.
I gotta ask the question, Craig, what speed, what RPMs do you max out on that?
I turn at 700 RPM.
Okay. I was gonna say,
Yeah, and tell them how long it takes to get it up to 700 RPM.
Yeah, it takes a couple of minutes. You got to sneak up on it slow because otherwise the motor gets a little faster than the belt and it starts screaming. So,
yeah.
and you got to slow it down as well. It takes a few minutes to slow down.
Have you done the math on what that outside perimeter speed is?
150 miles an hour.
Oh,
And it puts out a lot of wind.
I bet.
You got to feed your mice really well, or your
Yeah.
hamsters really well.
Hamsters.
Yeah.
Well, I think, Craig, one of these days we'll have to get up there and videotape the operation and bring that to one of these meetings.
Yeah.
The still pictures just don't do it justice.
Yeah,
right.
I've got there's like a 1.5-minute video on my website. But you can see on this photo here also, this piece of wood, when I planed it down, actually had some stress cracks in it from it probably kiln drying too quickly. So I actually filled them in with some black epoxy. And as I turned it, I wound up having bubbles exposed. So I had to make some dams around the area so I could put more epoxy in and stuff. So
Good.
Is that plywood in the center there?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's just a temporary spacer.
Oh, I see.
I thought he was showing off how much money he had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when I'm this piece will get one more center on it like these two, and then it will get 9 rings added to it. So in all, this piece will have 12 centers on it.
Oh, wow.
But you can see the counterweights on the rest of the faceplate.
How are you mounted to the faceplate, by the way? Screws from the back?
Yeah, you can see, I don't know if you can zoom in on this, but the sculpture itself is glued to a piece of 1/2-inch plywood. And then that's screwed to the faceplate through the from the front. So everything's measured out with an X and Y axis. So I can get everything positioned back in as to where my drawings are on the piece.
What are the counterweights? Are they steel plate or what?
Yeah, they're 3/4-inch steel plates, different sizes.
So I got one more stupid question. If it takes a couple of minutes to wind up, how long does it take to stop?
Well, this lathe does not have an automatic brake, so I have to slow it down very slowly with the speed dial. And once it gets to a certain point, I hit the stop button, and then I've got a big block of Babinga that I use on the edge as my handbrake. Otherwise, it would take about an hour to stop.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
Or
man.
you have to wait till the hamsters die.
Yes.
That's where disc brakes would be better than drum brakes too.
Yeah.
Very, very impressive, Greg. That's quite a piece of work. Thanks for sharing that. That's pretty amazing.
We have Richard Cook took video of this. We went out there, what was that, 2 years ago, Craig?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, we went out there and he took a video actually of Craig bringing it up to speed, I think, and then a couple of us turned on it as well. And he took videos of that, so we could ask him if he's still got that video.
All right, Mark.
Hey guys. Okay, so this week I'm showing you some sweet gum. This is wood that I was given in last November. A neighbor said he was cutting down a tree, and it was a pretty good size sweet gum. So asked me if I wanted some of it, and of course I took it. Never having turned sweet gum before. And no, I don't like the trees. I don't like the mess they make. You know, and the wood is a little bit unusual because it's, you know, it has this alternating grain thing. So cutting it is a little bit unusual. And there's really no, not much separation between the heartwood and the sapwood on it. And so the interesting thing was, okay, so I got this wood cut down and, you know, cut up some bowl blanks, and the thing I turned was just a natural edge, you know, over by the bark side. And the wood is just completely just pale off-white, and doesn't say a whole lot, especially on the sapwood. And, you know, and I did it, you know, just turning one pass so that it was all finished green, and it stays this cream color. Now the rest of them, it's really interesting. I would rough turn a bowl and seal it up in seal cell and put it aside. I really noticed this like when I had to put one of the blanks in a plastic bag overnight. I'd take it out of the bag and it is just grown stuff. You know, I mean, there's just black stuff all over it, looking kind of scary. So, you know, I used my respirators when handling it, and then found the same thing happens when you do your first turning and you seal them up in anchor seal. That a day or two later, there's just this black bloom that grows across the whole surface. But whatever that black bloom is that's really scary, it's working on the inside as well, and it's changing this stuff from being just this pale wood to what you see right here. It gets really rich brown, has gray tones and some greens, and it's really lovely. So anyway, so this is one of the two pieces I'm showing you. This is a calabash. You see the size, it's pretty big, 13 inches across, 5.5 inches, weighs 4.5 pounds. when I turned this one, I decided that I turned one before it and I thought it was too heavy. So I really tried focusing on going on a diet program with this, such that the rim thickness, that's the widest part of the bowl. And then from there, it gets undercut to a more reasonable thickness. I think I was trying to get, just over ½ inch, maybe 5/8 of an inch.
That's
As best I
remarkable.
could across the whole surface. It didn't actually cut the weight down that much.
Pretty remarkable figure on that.
Yeah, it's lovely stuff. Yeah, and you see there are a couple knots. Now that wasn't actually the center pith of the tree there, but that was like a cross branch growing through it. It went all the way through one side, in one side out the other. Anyway, so what I'm showing you on this picture, there's a little bit of bragging here on the two lines that go around the bowl. Now this piece, it was really weird because it kept wanting to move on me. I thought it was dried well enough, but I think that some of the figuring was, as you cut the wood away, it was starting to pull it one way or another. So I actually had to finish the inside, or completely sand the inside and get it ready before I could do my final truing on the outside. Then when I do the outside, I get it all ready to go and sanded to 220 grit before I put the 2 grooves in there. And I do that so that I can use spindle gouge on them and get really clean lines that I can, sand slightly so that they actually have a profile to them, and then not have to do more sanding on the outside of the bowl, which makes the bowls a little bit less round. And so, I don't want the grooves to be shallower on one side than on the others, or to have rounded edges. So I did them like this. Anyway, I wanted everyone to look at the other picture of it standing up on edge, because that's, that profile for a calabash, I'm guessing at it a little bit, and I don't know if anybody had any experience or insight on it, but my method has been really to take that curve from around the side, and then it really gets shallow across the bottom, so that right in the center, it's not flat, but it's, it's all but flat. So, I mean, it rocks easily, but I feel like don't have any trouble with it ever listing to one side just because of the slight variations in the wood. Anyway, I don't know if there's any, like I said, comments on the shapes the calabashes should be, because that's one of the things I'm kind of working with.
We need Chris.
Yeah. Chris Painter.
Oh, is he the calabash guy?
He's the calabash guy.
Mark, I thought the typical calabash flares out at the rim a little bit to the outside. So I'm not referring
Really?
to the whole shape that you're asking about, but I thought, isn't it supposed to do that?
I've actually never heard of that, but I guess you could do that.
Mark, if you go on
bottom.
Instagram, Kelly Dunn, do a search on Kelly Dunn. He's in Hawaii.
Okay.
He does a lot of calabash, and you can get just by looking at his images, you'll learn a lot.
I will look. Kelly Dunn, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on.
Right, moving on to the other sweet gum. So yeah, put a coffee cup there for scale, obviously, and this is a larger bowl. The couple points that okay, so if you look at the other picture, so it is, I called it a footed bowl because that, the black ring foot on there is a little bit taller than I would normally have for a foot of my bowls, and it has a little bit of a dovetail flare on it. I usually just make my foot out of the tenon, and in this one, the tenon was a little bit deeper than I usually have, so that's when I decided, well, let me just put a dovetail, flare this out a little bit, and see what it's like to give it a pedestal, see if I can get the bowl to float off the table a little bit. I'm happy with how it worked, and the black was done with with dye. I didn't use the correct dye. I played around with some others and found one that's better, because one I used is a little bit too thin, and so it wants to follow, wants to soak into the wood grain and move a little bit. So the line isn't perfect. I wondered how I could mask it and get it fixed right, and then ended up just saying, well, the lathe goes down to 100 RPM. So I just turned it at 100 RPM where I could hold the brush steady and slowly put the ink on it, which worked well. So anyway, large bowl, I think it will work great on somebody's dining table. It has nice, I like the rim because you get your hand around it and it's easy enough to pick up. Now I turned this bowl backward from how I usually turn bowls. This bowl is facing into the tree, which I know folks do because you can get a larger bowl out of that than if you face it outside. And I always face mine out of the tree, but I wanted to just see kind of how the other half lives, because I noticed most guys do them facing the way this one is. And I just want to say that I don't like the grain as well at all. But, you know, if there's any comments from the guys who like turning this way, why it is that you do that, or what you see as being the benefits, I'd love to hear about that at some point.
Why do you not like the grain?
The way
I
the
don't
template form.
Yeah, I don't like the 4 quadrants that you get when you do it this way, you know, and that the heartwood is up at the top in those 2 little patches. And if the bowl is flipped around the other way, then you get the swoopy S curves and not this north, south, east, west grain thing.
Well, let's we need to move on here, but nicely done. I mean, both of them are exceptional. The finish and the figure and both of them are really exceptional, Mark. That's nicely done.
Well, thank you. And yeah, guys, if you're ever tempted to turn some sweet gum, go for it. It's really nice wood. Just don't be afraid of it, and make sure you have your respirator when you pick up that black gunk.
All right, Mike.
This is a piece of Norfolk Island pine that I got from a wood store on the Big Island of Hawaii, and it's turned end grained because you can see the branches the way they go out. It's soaked about 6 months in a mixture of boiled linseed oil, mineral spirits, and matcha oil. I had it in a plastic container, sort of like a Home Depot 5-gallon can, but it had a dual seal rubber O-ring, so I was able to keep it closed and not lose any vapors over the 6 months. I took it out at the end of 6 months, dried it, and used a Beal Buff, the Rouge wheel, and then next day it kept sweating, and I dried it again and did more of the wheel. I did that for about 2 weeks before it stopped sweating, and this is what you see. Without the light inside, it's a very lackluster piece, actually. You can talk to, or Kelly Dunn has a website where he talks about what he did, and so did Ron Kent, the late Ron Kent. And what amazed me about Ron Kent was I saw him on the internet, and I called and left a message. I don't know this guy from the man in the moon. And 10 minutes later, he calls back and answers my questions. So he was quite a guy.
Cool.
That's nicely
Nice
done.
piece.
Yeah, those are nice. I like that.
Yep.
Looks really good.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Very
Very
impressive. Lampshade.
all right, Michael. This makes me dizzy just looking at it.
Made me dizzy making it.
Oh my God.
first attempt at a basket illusion platter, and now I won't lie, I'm kind of hooked. So everything now looks like a basket illusion to me. I think it's maple. It was given to me as a slab. It could be pecan though, which I know sounds crazy to not know the difference, but I don't think it's maple, but I don't think it's not maple. Anyways,
Basket
so
now,
it's
so
almost,
it doesn't matter.
yeah, exactly. So it's almost 14 inches, about an inch and a half tall. Colored over 3,600 of those squares, 120 spokes, indexed. Used the Faber-Castell pens, and then finished it with the Krylon archival spray.
So you have a special index wheel then to get that many segments, right?
Yeah, so I bought one off of eBay. I can't remember the name of it. They're only about $100, which I thought was fair. After seeing that, I've also seen where people take some plexiglass and they print off their own index at different degrees, and they have a little jig that they could do. So you could probably get away with doing it for less than $25. But the indexing wheel, I'll use it in other ways too, because I want to start carving more of my hollow forms and things like that.
Yeah, I have the indexing wheel. I could not keep it from bleeding. How did you keep the bleed from going into the lighter color?
Oh, the fiber or the Faber-Castell pens. I don't think they're India ink, but they're called Pitt, P-I-T-T, artist Pitt pens. And they have a brush tip and then a super fine tip. So the super fine tip lets you get in between your beads. And then the brush tip, obviously you can get larger strokes.
That's Michael, that's exceptional.
Thank you.
I mean, it's very neat. Like LF was saying, I mean, it's just that you can't see any bleed between the patterns, and that really is that's nicely done.
You know what's cool about this is, I mean, it was about 25 hours to do it. The turning part is not difficult by any stretch of the imagination, but you know what it let me do is it let me sit in my recliner up in my man cave and, you know, burn the lines and then color while I'm watching or listening to World War II documentaries or whatever. So it's kind of nice to do something like this because it's not all shop time. It's like, you know, just hanging out in front of the TV time, doing that kind of stuff. So now I'm kind of hooked.
Yeah, the pattern looks like it's in a spiral too.
Yeah, I saw it. There's a video out there by a guy named Pete Shue, I think is his name. It's a wood turning demo he did for Bay Lake, and that was a pattern he had, and he explained it, the math behind it, and the process. So I didn't originate the pattern by any stretch of imagination. I've been told it's called steps, and it's I'm probably mispronouncing it, Akama Indian tribe. It's like one of their patterns. So I won't pretend to know anything about patterns or where they came from, and I didn't originate this pattern. I copied it. I just thought it was really cool. But you know, once you understand the math and the process behind it, then it's just repetition. You're sitting there in your recliner, you know, hanging out and just coloring like a little kid in a color book.
Yeah. Exceptional. Very nicely done. We look forward to the next ones.
Yeah, really.
I got it on the lathe, but the dog broke my wood burner. She chucked it across the room when she got her leg caught up in the wire. So I got to fix the wood burner first, and then
I'll get back to it. Can you do a 25-hour demo?
Yeah, sure, absolutely, man. Let me actually start recording it. We'll just play it raw.
All right, moving on. Stefan.
Thanks, guys.
Steve, would you go to the next one first, to the next photo? So I had seen those donuts on Instagram, or maybe they are bagels. So I turned them last weekend just for the fun of it, and I really enjoyed it. And then I put them on a plate together with orange juice next to it and fooled some of my friends that they thought they were real. Just the whole thing is for fun. The right one is, I'm not sure, I think it's sycamore, ambrosia sycamore. Who said yes?
norm here. That's
Yeah, that's what it looks
That,
like.
that digital pattern is the giveaway. It looks like sycamore
Yes.
to me too.
That's what I thought too. And then the last one is maple, also ambrosia maple. Not difficult to do, I must say.
Well, Stefan, you fooled me on Instagram because when I was scrolling through, I saw it and I was like, why is he posting pictures of his breakfast?
Yes,
you should take it to a coffee shop.
yes.
Watch somebody
absolutely.
break their teeth on it.
Yeah.
I was trying to say he would be liable for the broken teeth.
Actually, Stefan, I looked at that and said, I bet you I could make that a base for one of my acrylic spheres.
You could do that too.
That-
And I have to look up, and maybe you guys know that, what the definition of a donut is and what the definition of a bagel is. How do you tell what is what?
That's how they're made.
Yeah, one's a pastry, one's a dough.
Yeah, no, that one I understand, but by form and shape and size, that's what I'm wondering.
I was just making up what I just
I
said
wonder,
anyway.
what do
So
you
it
call the
wasn't
left
serious.
one?
I don't.
Hey, Stefan, how do you
Half
do
the
the
cup.
backside? I can see how you do the front and get it almost done, but how do you reverse it?
I was wondering too, Preston, at first, and I looked at YouTube. It's, what do you call this big thing that I used to use before I had a vacuum chuck?
Oh, got it.
Cold chuck,
What is it?
cold chuck,
Cold
Yeah,
jaws.
cold chuck, that's right.
cold jaws, yeah.
And it has these, so it's these big 4 metal things, and then you can put the rubber stoppers onto it, and you can squeeze the bagel into it.
Okay.
You need some rubbers that are long enough so that they really hold it. Fortunately, mine were, because these donuts or bagels are relatively flat. And that worked extremely well, I must say.
Nice.
Nicely done.
Yep.
And then this is the second piece that I had put next to the workshop. It was a cutoff from an oak piece, willow oak. And when I went to the workshop and I saw the piece and it had darkened with the UV light and the rain, I guess, I had not anchor sealed it. And I took it inside, and this is my first winged bowl that I ever made, or square bowl, just to experiment with it. I must say here on this image, particularly on this one, it doesn't really come out as well as I think the real one does, but it was a crotch piece. So there's this disturbed, you have the rings on the left lower side at 7 p.m. and at 1 o'clock, and that half is really the crotch piece, has a wild structure to it, and also these discolorations everywhere. The camera, I think, had difficulties focusing on the different parts, and that's why it looks a little out of focus, but it's really the wood structure, which in real life, I think looks really nice. And I have it right here. It's the hand size. It feels very nice in my hand. It's easy to pick it up here on these wings. It's very round, and I like the shape, homogeneous in this middle. I was very happy the way it turned out.
Very nice. Most autofocus cameras look for vertical lines to focus on. Keep that in mind.
Yeah, but how do I fix that?
Shoot it from a different angle. Flip the photo when you're done.
Or just manual focus it. So, all right, nicely done.
Yeah, very nice.
Jerry.
Okay, so this is sweet gum also, and it didn't come out looking as nice as what Mark had earlier. This was basically a tree branch that had been laying on the ground about 6 months before I got it. It spalted all the way through, had bugs in it and stuff, and it was kind of a gray with, you know, black spalting. It didn't have the nice browns, so I ended up coloring it. It was turned it once, kind of like a 1/2 inch thick, and then eventually turned it down to about 3/16 of an inch thick. And because I didn't like the color, I did the inside black, the rim black, and the outside red. And I finished the outside, but I haven't finished the inside yet because it's got holes in it and stuff, and I'm trying to figure out how to get the inside finished without the finish leaking through the holes and stuff and messing up the outside. So,
I love the shape and the color.
thank
It
you.
really works.
Same here.
Hey, Terry,
I think it's really effective.
Stephen actually told me something that I found I never realized is it gets really dramatic if you use multiple colors.
Yes. Yes.
So I did a purple followed by a red, and it's amazing what kind of depth of color you get by doing that.
Yeah, I've done that on a couple other pieces. I wasn't sure whether I didn't do it on this piece. So, but that's a good idea, Norm.
Wasn't mine, but happy to steal it.
Yeah, and what I ended up doing also was the bug holes and stuff that you can see from the outside. I colored those as best I could black, so they're contrasting. You can't see them in this picture. There's a bit on another picture, but yeah. So
Was the inside dyed or is that like India ink?
it's India ink.
What
So I
about
did-
taking, what are they called? Like the sponge brushes and just getting it slightly damp so it doesn't bleed through in those holes?
Yeah, I had that idea. Thanks, Michael. I'm thinking that that's the way I have to do it. I can't just put finish in there and kind of slosh it around or anything, or it'll be spraying out all over the place.
Well, it doesn't work.
Milk paint. Milk paint has a little thicker consistency and
Oh, yeah.
might work for you too.
Yeah. Okay.
Well,
That's
it
another
doesn't
good
work,
idea.
Terry. Don't blame me, please. Thank you.
Hey, I won't blame you. And then this is my second piece. So this is a Mulberry Natural Edge crotch bowl. So you can see it's there's three piths there from the crotch, and it was once turned and probably a year and a half ago or more, and then I just let it sit, and I finally just got around to finishing the bottom and putting a little base on it. I was able to, you can see in this picture to the right hand front lip there, it had these little spikes on it, and I was able to maintain a few of those when the bark came off.
Like burl remnants.
Yeah, it's like little bitty pieces of burl or something. But it was just a piece of mulberry I picked up, on the side of the river one day when I was fishing.
Right. That's nice.
You're very nice.
Thank you.
No, it's a good symmetry on the with the two pieces there. A lot of times it's hard to get that directly in the middle, but it looks like you achieved that pretty well. Because if it had been off center, it would have screamed at you that it was off center. So no, that's
Even the third pith there is centered with the other two, so that works really, really well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's nicely done.
Yeah, and it's about 6 1/4 inches high and or 6 1/4 inches diameter and about 4 inches high.
And what'd you finish it with?
Minwax Antique Oil.
Because it looks like it doesn't look like it yellowed it the way a lot of tung oils sometimes do.
Yeah, well, the mulberry starts out kind of yellow anyway, so I don't think, putting the oil on it really changed the yellow that much.
Right.
That's my thought. I don't know.
So Terry, will you expect this to darken the way Mulberry does, or do you think the finish?
That's an interesting question, Mark, because I had like 4 pieces of this mulberry, and some of them darkened immediately.
Right. That's my experience.
Some of them stayed yellow, and I don't know what the difference is. I mean, over time, I'm guessing it's going to darken, but so far, and it's probably been 2 years now since I picked
it's not going to do
up,
it then.
It hasn't darkened, but it also hasn't been out in the light very much because, it spent a lot of time in a paper bag with shavings, and than a lot of time, in my box where I have projects that I need to finish and stuff like that. So good question. I'm anxious to see what happens.
Yeah, let us know.
All right. And then the last one for the first half of our meeting is mine.
How long before you're gonna eat?
Wait a minute. Probably.
All right.
Got 'em.
Yeah. This one is mine. This is a piece of wood that I rescued from Mike Smith's burn pile. And it had a crack that was close to 1/8 of an inch at its widest point. This is about 16 inches in diameter. And so I thought it'd be a good time to try butterflies. So I filled the crack with epoxy and brass powder. The photograph shows it dark. It's actually, the brass shows up somewhat bright in real life, but I attempted to put butterflies. I put 3 in, and my intent was to have the butterflies go all the way through. And I used the Rockler system, but the butterflies are only at max 1/4 of an inch thick with the bit that you get with their system. So that necessitated, to make them go through, it necessitated making it very thin. So it's only about 1/8 of an inch thick. And I managed to get 2 out of the 3 to come through. I couldn't get the third one. It was just, I was down to nothing left. So I just didn't want to lose it. So, but since I've done this, I found a router bit, and you're limited. The thickness of your butterflies you're only using an 1/8 inch router bit to cut the butterflies. And the one that comes with the kit it's a 1/8 inch diameter, and it's got a 1/4 inch flue on it. So because when you get something that small, you don't want to get a lot of flex in your bit. But I've since found one that has 3/8 of an inch of flute on, so I can cut some little bit thicker butterflies on it, because what I really was going for was to try to have the butterflies come completely through. So, yeah, it was a fun experiment to do, and get the butterflies on there. So.
And Steve, with that system, do the patches fit pretty well in the recesses that you make with the templates, or was there much sizing and playing with that?
No sizing at all. It uses a 2-step collar on your router. So you use a template that to cut it the recess, and then and I cut the recess before I roughed out the outside of the bowl, but I hadn't turned the inside yet. So I didn't have to worry about punching through. So I cut outside, and then I just hot melt glued the template on. You cut it, and then you take the outside ring of the collet off, and you use that to cut the butterfly. So using the same template, same router bit, all the same setup, and they fit right in. I mean, I did not have to do anything other than tap them in. So
okay, well, that's the question, because I got one of those systems, and it doesn't. Even just doing it on test pieces on flat work, they don't quite fit. They're like too loose, the butterflies, and so I've adjusted it with a little bit of tape and things like that. But I'm trying to MLCS. Have you dealt with them? They do router bits and routers. Anyway, it looked like a good game, and usually the stuff I got from them was quality. So I don't. Maybe I just need to get a different.
The Rockler one, I have it as well, and it works well. The only complaint I have is that the sizes, it goes like from the size, it looks like what you use here, Steve, to like a really big size. They need more finer increments in them, but other than that, they work pretty well.
Maybe what we could do is, I know that 2 or 3 years ago, we had a demonstration of the butterflies in the club. We could do a workshop at one of our workshops, maybe just about butterflies for a few interested people.
Yeah.
A breakout session.
Breakout, yeah.
Yes.
That we certainly can. Yeah. Anyway, it was just a fun piece. I mean, and this the figure on this piece of wood was just so it's got a lot. It's got burl in it, but even the wood that's not burl, I assume it's maple, or maybe big leaf maple, but it was fun, and it's as thin as I've ever turned a piece, certainly that big. It weighs nothing, so fun piece. So
Steve, I'm not familiar with maple being that yellow.
the finish on it, I don't know, Stefan. I just a lot of what Mike had that I got from him, and was big leaf maple. So I'm not sure. This had been sitting outside for a long time, so I figured it may have weathered, but I'm just not sure. Maybe it wasn't that yellow until I put the seal cell on it. It did yellow in a little bit. So not sure. I don't know for sure what it is. I guess it's possible it could be elm or something, but
Most of the big leaf maple I've gotten from Michael does go that color. It browns and yellows significantly.
Mm-hmm.
I've always used an oil finish with his stuff, and the big leaf maple has gotten really a lovely rich brown, much darker than our Eastern maple.
Okay. So, Steve, I understand that the butterfly insets now are adding visual effect, but if you had just pressed epoxy into that gap, do you think it would have held, or do you really think you needed butterfly to keep the wood together?
on something that's 16 inches in diameter, I wasn't sure whether epoxy would have held that together, and because it was a radial, the crack radiated almost from the center, and I wasn't sure. I would suspect that there's a chance that would have maybe opened up with time. I would have had to leave it a lot thicker in order to get enough bond on there to get the glue to hold it, or the epoxy to hold it together.
It most definitely will not now.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I don't think it will now. So.
Okay.
All right. So, yeah, and Stefan, if you want to do a breakout sometime with this, I actually have some larger platters that I'm doing it on now, and I'm doing much bigger butterflies on it because the walls are going to be much thicker. But yeah, we can certainly do that if there's interest.
So I would be interested.
So.
Yes.
All right. And that's the last one. So Ted, is Eric on?
I don't think he's joined. I looked just a second ago. Let me just check again.
2 minutes late, he's fired.
Oh yeah, he is here. Says he's on.
There he is.
There he is.
You there, Eric?
He doesn't have audio connected based on what I'm saying.
He says he's connecting.
I think
Eric,
you can
you there?
hear us, though.
Hey there.
All right.
There it is.
Made it. Thank you for joining, Eric.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. Well, I don't want to cause a little hiccup in the momentum that you guys have going or what you were talking about. I'm curious.
No, your timing is perfect. We were just finished up the first set of things, and Steve was just talking about butterfly inserts that he put in for a crack on a platter. And we had just finished that conversation, and we said, well, let's see if Eric has joined.
Awesome.
So
All right.
We have 5 pieces that we're dealing with the embellishment theme that will
Excellent.
that will go through. So I assume you can see what's on the screen.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we will then go into that. And this is Bob Edmondson.
Yes. This is more or less a practice piece. I've got 2 other hard maple pieces that I've turned. This was a piece of cherry that I had. I turned the bowl and then I got inside of it and it got real punky on me. So it then became a exercise of what can I do with it. So rather than using the that bin lacquer primer, I said I might be better off with using some gesso. So I put gesso in the material they call GAC 200 in there.
Yep.
And it filled a little bit, but it gave me a decent surface that I could at least attempt the ombre paint, which is what I was wanting to do there. So that was using Golden's yellow and red and just trying to get that ombre effect there. And then on the outside of the bowl, I was just playing around with faceting and did an application of black milk paint. And that's kind of where I left off. I've got, as I mentioned, 2 others that are turned in hard maple and have a lot better surface. I want to try doing his other painting method that he had a demonstration on here not too long ago, and see if I can do that. But I'm pretty well convinced in my head I'm going to end up turning it off a couple of times before I get it close.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, Bob, I'm curious. What was one of your biggest learning moments in doing this piece?
Well, in this particular piece, it was finding out that I had that punky piece down in the bottom, and what are you going to do with it? So, I mean, I'm always one experimenting with stuff, so I figured I got nothing to lose and everything to gain. So that's why I tried the gesso and GAC 200 to see if I could get some fill in there. And that I don't know whether you're familiar with that GAC 200, but it gives you kind of a it gives you a harder surface.
Okay.
And it's toothy, but it's a harder surface, so you can, when you start to apply the paint on it, it takes it pretty well. And
Yeah.
From that standpoint, I try that again, even on a good piece of wood, just to see what would happen. So
Yeah.
what else? I had never really done faceting. I've done faceting with a chisel, with my hand chisels. This I did with the rotary sander.
Okay.
That was the first time I'd ever tried that. So that was another thing that I had, and I'll do that again. That worked out very well.
Yeah, it's amazing that the faceted surface is not the same as a faceted surface is not the same as right? It's like different styles of facets.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. What is, aside from the faceted surface on the outside, was there anything that was an absolute brand new first time ever trying it?
Well, I'd never done anything with an ombre.
Okay.
All right. I mean, I like painting, but I'd never tried that ombre technique, and I want to try some different colors now to see. I do have a question on your Namaste bowls where you do the paint on the inside. You get that kind of a swirl. Have you ever tried reds and yellows?
Yes. I have. I've done purples. I've done blacks and grays and whites. I've done, greens. Greens and blues tend to be the color palette that I lean towards in those, or reds and yellows to blend in the orange. With the spiral, my influence and my inspiration is really around the sense of water and a whirlpool.
Right.
So lending towards those tones, greens to blues. So yeah.
Good. Yeah. So I got a lot of things I can experiment with.
Absolutely.
That's
Gosh.
great. Yeah. It's
Wow.
fun.
Well, a couple things. I don't know, and having just jumped in here, I don't know how this is set up or expectation or anything like that. But can I offer one or two things that attracts me to the piece, and one of the two things that I'm wondering about, or
Sure.
distracts my eyes? Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, that's fine, Eric. I mean, this is so Eric, this is kind of the first time we're really doing this. So,
Wonderful.
but the focus, we're trying to get, post demonstration to get some, people trying pieces. So, but
Yeah.
no, we welcome, and we have lots of time. We only have 5 pieces. So,
Good.
yeah, no, we welcome your comments.
Wonderful. Well, first off, thanks for being willing to welcome me in and inviting me in. And I'm super excited to be part of this. This is to be able to get feedback on pieces. For me, I'm always my strongest critic. And I know a lot of people are that for themselves. I think it's always nice to get an outside perspective, someone who doesn't share the experience of making the piece, to get a removed perspective from the piece, even if they've done something like it before or the same technique. So I'm offering the attraction, distraction are the words that I use, but really it's what things do I see that were very appealing and how they've been the result of it. And then what are some things that I'm wondering about, or areas that I wasn't part of the process, and so I don't know the story, but just offering a more objective view of the finished object. And all around the idea of learning and continuing to learn. So Bob, first off, kudos to you for going for it and giving it a try, and making a piece and diving in and still investing your time and your effort and your emotion into a piece, even though there was an unexpected little bump in the road with the asphalt or the soft wood and all of that. I think those are some of the most fun pieces to dive into, because once you see that, you can kind of let go of like, it has some flaws in it. I'm going to see what I can do with it and explore. So kudos to you on that. Some things that are really attractive to me and to my eye. Number one, the combination of colors. The yellow into the red, and it almost appears in the photo a pink, kind of orange pink tone, is a really attractive warm glow to it. And it looks as though the curve is actually a pretty nice curve for that resonant feature of how it it traps the light and creates this glow. Some things that also attract me about the outside, I like the facets where they look, it almost appears as though it's like a chipped stone on the outside with the way that the facets are. And sometimes the facets that I create are almost, they're so uniform and flat that it can start to look a little bit machined. So I like that. It has a really organic character to the outside in the way the shadows play off the facets. And to me, that's really attractive, contrasting with that purity of the curve on the inside. One other thing that really attracts me is the lift that you're able to get with the foot. Always adding a foot to things, especially if it's really a subdued foot or a foot that just kind of works to support the piece rather than distract from the piece or compete with the form. It appears to be a very cylindrical foot, which then just highlights everything else and just elevates it off the surface so light can get underneath it and give it kind of a lightness. So those are 3 areas that are really attractive to me, really pleasing to the eye and makes me want to interact with it more. Some areas that I'm wondering about, or I have some curiosity about, and again, we're just, through the photos, is I'm wondering about the rim. And it appears as though the rim is cut in just slightly, angled in, as opposed to flat. And I might be wrong, but it appears like it's just slightly dipped in towards the inside. Is that
I'm looking at the actual piece, and it is actually flat. That's kind of a,
okay?
I think from the photograph, it gives it a well. It might be, Eric. It might be slightly
like 2 or 3 degrees.
Yeah, just very slightly. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So what I'm wondering about is how playing with the angle of that rim invites interaction into the piece or repels and says, hey, kind of stand off. I know from the pieces that I've turned, when I angle that rim in just a little bit more, it creates a different shadow line when you're looking across the piece as it's just standing up and you're looking across from rim to rim. And it can be really inviting. So that's one of the areas I'm wondering about, is if you were to play with that angle of the rim, everything else created the same. If you were to play with that angle of the rim, how that would change the invitation to react or to interact with it.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing about the rim that I'm wondering about is the organicness of those facets and playing with a way to get it so that the rim is either very intentionally asymmetric or more symmetric than it is. It looks like it's about halfway in between, where in the photo that's on the screen right now at the top, it looks like there's a thinner section of the rim where there's a large facet. And then towards the bottom of the picture, the lower portion of the rim in this photo, it looks like it's thicker or wider. So I wonder about how that can play into the sense of organicness on the outside, and or tune it up so that it's a consistent facet around the rim and it looks like halfway between that really organic and the really pure curve on the inside. So it can kind of marry those two. And the third thing, since I gave you 3 things that are really attractive about it to me, the third thing that I'm wondering about is if there would be a different glow about the inside if the color didn't flow onto the rim, if it was either bare wood or if it was actually a blackened rim, and gave that kind of a sense of secrecy or sheltering of the color, that the color is only on the inside. Does that make sense, Bob?
Yeah, it does. I was going to take the paint off the rim, and I had painted the black first, and I thought, well, I think I'm just going to leave it there because I was kind of I was just unsure, so I figured I'll leave it that. But I can see maybe the black on the rim would have been a whole different effect. Yeah.
Yeah, try it using the same color palette and the same basic size and everything, and just see next to each other what the effect of that is, because I think it'd be really interesting to have that comparison.
Yeah, it'd be fun. It'd be fun.
Wonderful. Well, great job. I'm very pleasing form, very interesting effect, contrasting the outside with that inner, both that color and also the texture of the outside and the inner and the curves.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what if you just took all of the finish, all of the paint off of the rim and tilted it in just a little bit and made that the only part that was cherry?
Yeah.
You
could try that, definitely.
I had some other punkiness in that wood, so I recall that there was a spot on that rim, and I think that's why I went with the paint.
Yeah.
Not to cut off, but we probably should move on.
Yeah. Thank you, Bob, for sharing your piece and for offering it up as a learning.
Yeah.
That's great. Wonderful. Is this Michael?
It is. And real quick, I got to tell you, Bob, I love that piece. I think that piece is beautiful.
Thanks.
Yeah. Really nice.
So this was a branch of maple that I had kicking around, and after watching Eric's demo, I've never really done much texture, to be honest. I've been intimidated by it because I don't know, I'm one of those people that I have to be able to envision it from beginning to end. Not that I know exactly what it's going to look like when I'm done, but I have to be able to like envision it before I start on it. And I could never quite envision, so I would never start. And I've just been intimidated by it. And then, you know, Eric talked about the cutoff wheel and this, and I just figured, what the hell? So this was a piece of maple, the branch. I just turned a normal vessel like I would, hollowed it out. And then I had that carbide cutoff. I ordered on, and Eric, my wife's going to send you a bill for all the things I bought after watching your demo. So I ordered that India ink and the carbide cutoff wheel and some other things. And I just went to town on it. There are some things that I will do different next time, but I kind of liked the organic. If you guys remember the movie The Ring with the little girl that's in the well, her hair, that's what this reminds me of. It just reminds me of that wet hair. And then I did the graphite like you. I did exactly, I mean, I didn't do anything original. It was everything you did in your demo. I just copied it. And then I rubbed it with graphite, and I realized that if you don't spray it with the Krylon finish, you walk around with black hands all day. But so that's the end result.
Wow. What's one major learning for you? I love that you shared that your mental space around it and that angst and that apprehension around getting started. So I think that's really common, but I don't think that many people talk about it. And I love that you mentioned that, Michael. So thank you. What's one area that you really learned, or something that you really learned from this piece?
I learned that you can go at it organically, meaning with no plan, and you can still be pleased with the results. Now, I can nitpick it. I can say that I wish I would have done a different angle here, or I shouldn't have overlapped the lines there because there's a missing gap. I can nitpick it, but I was actually when I got done, I was pretty surprised and pleased. And then I learned that if you dye the whole thing black, it just gives it a whole different, I mean, it was like a different piece. If I had held up the original piece next to this piece, I don't think anybody would have thought they came from the same origin.
Yeah. Wow. I love that you say about the treatment of black. One of my very favorite treatments is just to blacken the piece, because now you're seeing the true silhouette of the piece and the visual, the color and the sometimes the grain tends to just disappear, and it's no longer a distraction from the form. So some things that are really attractive, and I'll go a little bit quicker clip now that people have kind of the flavor of that attraction and distraction, or attraction and wondering. Number one, I love this piece in black. I think you posted on Instagram, right?
Yeah.
And I commented, and it was so funny because the other pieces that you posted, my wife was like, "Oh, I love those." I said, "I love this," and we had a whole conversation around your work, which is awesome.
Thanks.
This almost to me looks like a piece of pottery that, as the clay was wet, it was wrapped in grass or something like that. It has this really organic texture and the striations, and I love the fact that they crisscross and create kind of these diamond type of shapes where the shadow comes down to a point at the bottom of them. I also really am attracted to the lack of a formal foot, at least in the picture. You may have a small formal foot on it, but it just kind of looks like it's floating there, and in a real organic and unassuming way. So it has a really nice, gentle presence to it. And the third thing that I would say is I like, and I'm attracted to how the lines, it tends to, it looks like the striations tend to kind of straighten out, or there's less crisscrossing as it goes up to the rim. So it appears, at least in the picture, that up at the rim, it's almost like if it was pottery wrapped in grass, it's like all the grass has been gathered towards the rim and they all start to go the same direction and nice and parallel, which gives a really nice contrast to a soft texture up at the rim, starts to get a little bit bolder, and then as it comes around the form, the belly of the form, the shadows get really dark. It gets really, really striking, hard texture lines, which is a really nice gradation, whether it was intended or not. It has a really
unintentional. It was unintentional, but a happy result.
Yeah, very attractive. So a couple of things that I'm wondering about in the piece is the use of graphite. And I love the use of graphite. And as you saw in the techniques that I was sharing, I'm wondering about if you were to start playing around with a little bit of colored pencil and start rubbing starting to explore like just a little highlight of this or a little highlight of that. And maybe a way to start playing with that to get even more of a pop is some white or some light gray pencil where it's still monochromatic in the black and white and grays, but just to be able to now start playing with, okay, I'm going to highlight this little spot or give a couple little streaks or striations to give even more visual texture. Because right now the graphite is really seen as the sheen off of the black, right? So it's very subtle. So that would be a wondering or an extension, something to try and play around with. Something else that I'm wondering about is the color on the inside and the color at the rim, and whether those striations go up and over the rim or whether they stop and the rim. Okay, good. So they look like they go up and just over the rim. So it gives that illusion that the piece is all out of the same texture and it's textured through the wall. If it was a cut rim, I wonder what effect that might have on it. It might look like more of a surface texture rather than actually what the piece was made of. So those are two of my wonderings.
And I like the idea of if I had done the inside in a whole different color, that contrast would be pretty impressive.
Yeah. One of the things I played with, and you might explore this, is if you've ever done any gilding or gold leaf, to line the inside with copper would be really amazingly stunning surprise when you peek inside and it's glowing orange.
That's a great idea.
But something to just think about or play with. And you could do that with paint and just roll it around on the inside to color it a bright color to just start with that. So yeah, really nicely done. Nicely done, Michael.
That piece reminded me of like a lava flow. And so, yeah, if it was like reddish inside or orange, like that would be pretty cool.
Okay, next meeting, I'll see what I can come up with, because those are great ideas. And by the way, real quick, who wants Eric to present your stuff for sale from now on? Because the way he describes your stuff, you know, I just need Eric to show up to any kind of art thing they ever go to and just say, talk to Eric, and I'm sure we'll all be rich.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it, Michael.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, Ted, take it away.
Yeah. So this piece is a piece of red oak that I turned, and yeah, I'm sorry. When I sent the files, they were a little bit small. So
Steve, try zooming in a little so we can get some size on these.
I just did.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong screen.
So I turned these in it was, my original thought was to create a barrel of it, you know, and then have this kind of texture on it. And so I did that, and I just put a foot on it actually to essentially hold it and do all the work and so forth. And I was going to cut that off, but after I finished it, I kind of liked it, so I kept that part of it. And the red oak, as you can see, there's a couple of cracks in it, which I was kind of testing it, you know, how to dry it and so forth, and try to prevent that. The walls of the piece in the widest section of it are thicker, so the inside is straight down in it, and so the walls on the where they bow out are thicker. And I was actually expecting it to split there, if any place, and it ended up not splitting there, but it's just split on the foot. So that was a kind of surprise to me. And then I ebonized it with vinegar and steel wool, and when I did that, it turned this chocolate brown. I thought, well, that wasn't what I was expecting to happen. But given, you know, the different circumstances, and it's actually the first time I made that brew, you know, and I learned after that maybe I let the steel wool rust in it, and that caused some of it. I'm not sure what caused it to be so brown, but I actually liked it in the end. So I decided, because at first I thought, well, if that's going to be like that, then I'm probably going to want to use some India ink on it, which I've used, you know, extensively before. But I really liked it, and so I kept that. And then I just put a couple coats of shellac on it. And then I actually, oh, sorry, I forgot the other part. After I did the ribbing on it, I took a wire brush and wire brushed with the grain everything that I could possibly out of it. So it's kind of hard to see some of the texture, but it does have quite a bit of texture in it, not only in the ribbing, but on the top and bottom portions as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so anyways,
Wow.
and then I just put a couple coats of shellac on it, and then I steel wooled off the shellac to take, because it was a little bit shinier. I wanted to, it was real powdery like after I used the ebonizing, and when you touched it, it came off on your fingers. So I wanted to seal that in so that you could handle it.
Yeah. Well, Ted, what's one thing, if you could name a learning from this piece, what's one thing that you felt like you learned or you explored for the first time?
Well, I think having the wall, the variable thickness, I don't think I'd do that again. I would try to keep it consistent, wall thickness through it, just because I think that probably did have something to do with it cracking on the bottom, which I just used some black CA on, and it actually came out looking okay with it.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And then I just that, you know, the ebonizing is an experiment every time, depending on the wood, and even with oak, it's going to be different. So
yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, a couple things that are really attractive about it. It appears to me, and it's very inviting in this way, it appears to be something that was that could have been dug up from a shipwreck or something like that, with the color tone, the erosion from the wire brushing, almost like it's some kind of an ancient goblet, you know, that was found on a ship with pirates or something like that. One of the things that I really like about it appears like it's beads or little V grooves or something like that around it, is with the wire brushing and the grain pattern, the soft and hard growth rings, it gives a really neat texture and contrast to those really pure, crisp lines that go around it concentric. I'm sure they were a lot crisper before you wire brushed it. And then once you erode it with a wire brush, it now brings the grain up to almost compete a little bit and give it a really interesting texture where it's not all the same. It's kind of a mottled. Some spots are rougher, some spots are smoother, and some real interest there. And that's, to me, why it almost appears to be something that has been at the bottom of the ocean. You know, like it's rusted a little bit here and there, and it's been cleaned up. Some of the things that I'm wondering about is kind of like you had mentioned, you know, what it would be like if it was all black. I see some black streaking up towards the rim or the top, and also down towards the bottom. And that makes me wonder about, you know, was that intentional? Was it by chance? Was it because the ebonizing solution was put on and that's where it lapped over top of, you know, I mean, it makes me wonder about the process, having done that a little bit myself. So I wonder about what kind of effect would it have if it was blackened, and then there weren't as many color tones in it, for better or worse, right? It might totally ruin the effect of that aging, but it also might help the grain pop out, that erosion of the grain from the wire brushing pop out even more. Another thing that I wonder about, and not being able to see the piece, I can't really tell, but is the pith in the piece? Or is it a piece of wood that the pith is removed from before you turned it?
Yeah, the pith is in it, in the bottom.
Okay.
Yep.
So, and one of the things that I wonder about with turning a piece with the pith in it is whether, when you went through the process, if you centered the pith, or if you paid attention to where the growth rings were centered and balanced within the piece. I know from experience and from teaching that a lot of people, when they turn a piece with the pith in, they center it on the pith and not necessarily search for balance in the growth rings. So I wonder about how balanced were the growth rings around the pith. Would it change the effect of how those arches, and on this picture, how those ovals play with the beads or the grooves in the side, if you were to have shifted it just a little bit so that you get an undulation of the growth ring all the way around, because the growth rings are the driving force for where you found center versus the pith found as the center.
Yeah.
So just playing with those two, like this picture on this side looks like the growth ring very much mirrors the shape of that cylinder, right? It's much more closely aligned to the actual diameter of the cylinder. The other side, it looks as though maybe the growth rings pushed out a little bit, and it looks almost like, oh, it looks like a quarter sawn piece of wood rather than one that was found growth ring centered. So those are a couple of my wonderings about color and how that plays with the texture or highlights or mutes the texture. And then also about preparing the piece and exploring, hey, I'm going to shift this just a little bit this way and see how it plays out in the circumference surface.
Okay. Yep. Good
Yeah.
idea.
Beautiful. Great exploration of that too. Way to go.
Yeah, and this is another piece of oak, and I just wanted to show the texture on it, and it's just I wire brushed this when it was green, so it was softer, and it came out, it pulled out, I think, a little bit more in some areas, a little bit easier, and the same on the top of it. In this piece, it came out really well. The pith, I didn't show a picture of the bottom, but the pith is pretty much in the center of this one, and it did not crack at all. This piece, I was lucky. It's like a 50-50 on oak, what's going to happen. So I've kind of stopped here with it. It's all dried out and it's ready to be finished, but I haven't put a finish on it yet because I was thinking about ebonizing it like that other piece on the sides, but possibly doing a color on the top and the bottom to give it a look of an effect, like there's a core that goes through it that's all one color, a different color, then has a skin on it that's a different color. So just to get your thoughts on any recommendations or thoughts you might have around that.
Yeah, wow. Just seeing the two pieces excites me for a possibility that I'll mention in just a second. So thinking about your idea of taking and coloring the top, and then, if I understand correctly, coloring the bottom too, so it looks like a core color going through it. That to me is really interesting and exciting. I'm wondering about how that would play out, and how large a diameter you would go on the top and the bottom as far as following those growth rings down or whatever. That could be really interesting and really powerful. On this piece, the first thing that I think of and that is very attractive about the piece is I'm wondering if you did any bleaching or if this was actually the brightness of the oak.
No, I haven't done any bleaching to it. It's just the oak, and it's a piece. I believe it was a piece of red oak, I believe, but I have some white oak as well. And I kept saying to myself, "You sure this isn't white oak that you got here?" But it is a red oak piece.
Wow. Well, one of the things that is really attractive is the color tone to me. I am a sucker for black to contrast with any color, because to me it frames it beautifully and makes the color pop. But the color and the texture in this piece, the first thing I think of is the texture of bone when it's been sitting out and weathered. Like if you're hiking and you come across a deer bone or something like that, or a cow bone, or bear, whatever, and that it's been weathered and it's been cleaned off by all of natural forces. And so for me, I wonder about what would this piece be like if it were wood bleached, and then to carry through on going either a black or some kind of a dye color for a certain number of growth rings from the center, like you said, almost like giving the effect of like bone and marrow going through the piece, and maybe choosing a diameter so that some of the growth rings, as it tapers down towards the foot, that some of that color starts to flow up from the foot to give a hint that casing on the outside, if you will, that it has eroded enough down towards the bottom where it really gives that like organic, like this has been tumbled, this has been chewed on, this has been, whatever, and give that organicness to it. And then with that, I also wonder, what would it be like to pose it in a way where it's not going vertical? To pose it with other pieces that may be this similar shape, similar forms, same wood, but dyed completely black, or the inverse, where the outside's dyed black and has a white core to it, and just have a yin and a yang, and have one tipped on its side and one tipped toward, and stage them so it's a composite piece of multiple pieces kind of stacked, almost like the idea of like a bundle of bones, or a pile of bones somewhere in the woods. Not that they have to look like bone, but just giving that kind of that essence to it. So that to me is pretty exciting. I love how the wire brushing came out and really eroded this piece, because it really invokes kind of that sense of bone. And then looking at the picture on the left, right up towards the top, it almost looks like some bone marrow is sticking through. I can't really tell what that is, but
it's
something like that.
Bark inclusion, but that would. I like your idea.
That could be a really powerful, some sort of a message in there. So.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, really, really nice, exciting. And I'll share with you guys. I can go for probably another 10 minutes, and then I've got a remote demo in California at 6, so my time. So
we just have one more.
Awesome, thank you, thanks Stephen for letting me know.
Thanks, Eric.
Yeah.
So markets have reopened, and the markets around here, at least, that if you don't have some low end stuff, people don't even walk in your booth, and then you can sell them the high end stuff. But so anyway, I was looking for something different to make, and these are the Ikebana discs that you just in there, and the other thing I found that this stuff is, and remarkably, I sold a whole bunch of these, and because I think I put flowers in them, but I sold the ones that were textured, so this is ash, and it's burned 3 times and wire brushed between each one. But when I looked at them just burned and put flowers in them, they didn't look good because it was just too dark. So rather than toss them, I decided to try some. The one on the right is liming wax, and the one on the left is gold rub and buff. It's a lot sharper in real life. It just couldn't get that. It almost looked like it's out of focus in the picture there, but it's natural wood on the bottom. I don't really like the shape of the one on the left so much, because I was trying to make a hard edge so I could leave it natural. The bottom, just burn the top. But I think going forward, I would just return the bottom in order to. I like the rounded shape on the one on the right. The other thing I learned on these is that if you put the liming wax on, or the rub and buff, I assume, but I didn't do it, but you need some kind of finish on there before you do that, or it just turns the whole thing awful gray. So I sprayed it with matte Krylon, several coats of that before I put the liming wax on. And then after I put the liming wax on, determined that if you don't put something on top of that, it'll come off in your hands. So I put Renaissance wax on top of that and buffed it. And that's why it's shinier than I would like it, but it also has to repel water. So anyway, there's 2 pieces that became a palette. Again, these are low end pieces, but I just opportunity to just play with the process.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. Steve, what is one thing that you learned about these or in turning these 2 pieces?
Well, definitely learned that if you're going to use liming wax, you have to put some finish on it before you put the liming wax on, or it gets into it really just models the whole thing. At least with with the burned ash. Maybe the other wood's not, but I had to return it because it was just not attractive at all.
Yeah, liming wax and the rub and buff, any kind of a patina paste that you put on highlights all texture, right? Everything. It wants to grip to texture and fill in the littlest tiny scratch marks or the littlest tiny texture from brushing or anything like that. And yeah, I agree with you. And I have an idea to try, but I'll save that for just a moment. So a couple things that are really attractive about these two pieces. Number one, I love that you're contrasting the grain after you erode it. I think that is a really great way, a very attractive way to highlight and show that it's wood, or some people might mistake it for stone if they're looking at it and there's no natural wood to the piece. They might go, oh, that's a really pretty layered stone, and then they pick it up and they go, wait, it's not as heavy as stone would be. That's unexpected. But to highlight those layers and the growth rings and the characteristics of the wood in a really a little bit more striking and I would say maybe contemporary way. And the Ikebana is a great way to do that, to be able to support a color palette that you can add to it, and you can play around with the flowers and all of that, and that the form of the base just kind of disappears in a support role rather than commanding center stage. But the grain pattern, having a really beautiful rhythm to it, can also act as a feature to support the lines and the form and the roundness of all of the petals, or the arc of flowers, like the stems and all of that. So thematically, it can support it that way in an artistic way. The color palette also works for or against whatever flowers you put in it as well. So the black and white, or any of that kind of monochromatic black and white spectrum, all the way through the grays and the silvers and everything, to me supports a wider variety of color tones. The yellow supports a very specific color tones and contrasts really beautifully with that. And so just in the two, you have kind of those two different worlds, a really warm and a really cold color palette to play with. Some other things that really are attractive is you mentioned that on the right-hand side, that you prefer that form a little bit more. And one of the things that attracts me about that form and how you've oriented the growth rings, whether it was intentional or unintentional, is that really gradual kind of dome form with a really unbroken curve, and no transition from convex to concave, or convex to flat, or concave to flat. It has a really beautiful flow and softness to all the lines that you've put on there through the wire brushing to accent the growth rings. And all of the flowing of those actually accent the form in itself, because the growth rings are very uniform and very, they look very consistent, as far as they don't have any zigzags in them or branches coming into it. It's very nice and pure. And that really accents and really plays off of that purity of the form. The one on the left reminds me almost like of tiger stripes or something like that in the color palette, but also in the way that the curve plays with the growth rings. It has a very busyness to it right up by the little insert, where it kind of zigzags around. And I think part of that is because it's a more complicated or complex form playing off of the growth rings. So that's kind of that effect, that contrast between the two. The one on the left feels like there's some tension in it, like emotional tension in it. The one on the right feels very calm and subdued. So I like the contrast in those two, and they'll appeal to different people for a different vision of what kind of flowers to put in, or what kind of framing they want to use. So those are things that are very attractive to me. Some things that I'm wondering about are if you were going for something really striking, if you were to play with a different color than black, playing with something like an India ink that is a blue with the white, or a deep, deep, deep navy, or a deep burgundy, or something like that. If you were looking to play with a simple form, but to really brighten up or get some energy into the color of it. Again, I like the simple monochromatic black to white and silvers because I think they play off of all colors really nicely. But you could explore the same form, the same basic grain, and explore the same exact techniques, but just doing a slightly different color tone than black and playing with the same liming wax in that. And just that might be really an exciting opportunity to explore some colors in that as well. Some things that I'm wondering about are if I were to see these in person, how clean are those lines? And you already kind of alluded to, you know, it was really tough to get the liming wax or the rub and buff on there and to get it to really stick in the recesses of the grain where you wire brushed it. You said you torched it and then wire brushed it. And one of the things that I know from experience that might be something to play with is when you wire brush, when you torch then wire brush, and I just call it flame erosion, right? But you're wire brushing all the soft carbon out, and then you flame it again and wire brush and flame it again. However many times you do that, if on the last wire brushing or two, if you used a softer non-woven synthetic pad instead of a wire brush, because you're going to soften out all of those brush marks, those little scratch marks, and you'll burnish the burnt surface that's harder, the parts that don't pick up the liming wax as much, and make them actually smoother. And then play around with, okay, if I remember right, did you add India ink to those, or is that just the burnt tone?
It's just the burnt tone.
Okay, so if you were to look for a darker black, you can add India ink to it then, or if you're looking to just keep the burnt tone, seal it with a gloss lacquer first. The gloss will smooth out all of the really fine texture of those burnished patches, but it will still leave the eroded growth rings, the soft growth rings, as a spot for the rub and buff or the liming wax to grab into. The gloss, put a couple layers of gloss on it to smooth it out. And then when you have that protective layer of gloss, if you needed to, you could sand back the very top layer of the gloss without going past the layers into the wood to take care of that liming wax, and you don't have to return the whole thing again. Okay, right. So it adds these layers of clear that now you can buff away where the liming wax wants to grip on it to get that really sharp contrast of soft growth ring, hard growth ring. The other thing is, if you wanted that softer sheen at the end, then after you apply the liming wax or the rub and buff, and you get it to where it's a nice clean transition between the two, or clean line, then you can coat it with a soft matte or semi-gloss or something to knock the sheen down, and to then tune up what kind of a feel do you want the piece to have. And that will allow you kind of the best of both worlds, being able to wipe the liming wax off the super smooth gloss finish, but it'll stick in the growth rings, and then being able to control after the liming wax is on with just a really soft matte on the top to just take that glare off and really soften it and warm it up a little bit.
So the problem, I actually tried that on a piece, and the finish, the spray finish, dissolved. It made the liming wax run, and it didn't.
Oh.
So
okay, so the finish. What finish did you use for specifically?
Just a Krylon satin finish.
A lacquer?
It's well, I think it's actually. I think it's. They say it's acrylic, but that's what's on.
Okay. So here's something to try. Let me grab.
Maybe enamel would work.
So no, don't use enamel or lacquer if that's playing with the liming wax. So I don't know if you can see my screen, but Krylon workable fixative.
Right.
Try that. Workable fixative. If you haven't used it before, right on the front, it's number 1306 is the item number right here on the can. It says protects pencil, pastel, and chalk drawings, prevents smudging and wrinkling, allows easy rework, and it's acid-free and archival safe. So this is designed to go over pastels, like oil pastels and chalk pastels, without liquefying it. Okay, so what you're going to want to do when you first apply it is just do a really light dusting, let it completely dry, like overnight. Then come back and do a second light dusting, let it dry for several hours, and then you can start coating it if you want to build up a finish. What you want to do is you want to just dust it, and the talc in the mat, it has a slight talc or a tooth to it. That's what makes it matte, or that soft sheen, is you want it to just lay on the surface and to start to build up this layer without re-wetting what's underneath it. So just a really light dusting, let it dry overnight so that it can actually start to really cure. And then that will solidify and lock in everything that's underneath it, so you can start just building it up a little bit. This is what I use on the graphite. This is what I use when I do a colored pencil and when I do chalk on top of pieces, which I didn't even get to explore any of that with you, but workable fix it if it's made for that.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Wonderful.
Right. Thanks, Eric. Really appreciate you coming back. Didn't expect you to spend this much time with us. It's been wonderful. I think everyone really enjoyed the feedback, and hopefully you enjoyed seeing the pieces as well.
Oh yeah, I love it. Absolutely. Well, hey, if you guys are, and Ted, I'm offering this to you in front of everybody, but if you ever have another opportunity like this, I'd love to be part of it, just to continue promoting, number one, the exploration of pieces and finishing, because that's one of my passions, but also my hope is that those of you that shared feel like the constructive feedback was valuable. And I think that one of the great things in wood turning that we can model is a really objective and sincere and hopefully with a lens of growth style of critiquing pieces, and just the language that I use is this attracts me, this distracts me, or I'm wondering about this. You know, I've seen a lot of critiques done where it's, I really like this and I really like this, and it's a beautiful piece of wood. And so hopefully those of you who shared pieces and I got a chance to comment on them, that you have some affirmation, some things to think about, and then some areas where you can see yourself stepping forward and growing. So
For myself, definitely appreciate it. You gave me some great ideas.
Yeah, very much.
Wonderful.
So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Look forward to
all right,
chatting again.
Yeah, all right. Look forward to chatting with you guys. Take care and be safe, and enjoyed the invitation. Thanks a lot for including me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Eric.
Bye.